Hey there, how there, ho there. It's Jeff Cutter Diamond. Welcome you to yet another Cutter Top 10 video. And today we're going to be looking at the top 10 CFL finishes of all time. Sorry, I'm a little nervous. Of course, wearing my Alouettes jersey. So we're going to be talking about the top 10 finishes to a game in CFL history. And there have been some great finishes and all that. So we'll get straight to it. As I look at my standings, make sure that everything looks about right. Yeah, there's a few that I kind of think was much better by proxy. So just making the notes. All right, here we go. Number 10 is the 2005 Grey Cup Edmonton Montreal. Of course, one of the first few that will have the Alouettes portrayed. Edmonton and Montreal were battling it out in 2005 Grey Cup. It was big. There was a big kickoff return for a touchdown by Tony Tompkins. Montreal kept going. Edmonton had to kick a field goal to force overtime. And for only the second time in Grey Cup history, an overtime had to happen and had to involve things. Montreal and Edmonton both scored touchdowns in the first overtime, and then the second overtime, Edmonton kicked the field goal. Montreal tried a few trick plays but failed miserably, and Edmonton, with Danny Manchota in his first year as a head coach, won the Grey Cup. A big 38-35 win. Number 9 is the 1987 Grey Cup, Edmonton-Toronto. This was big because this was the 75th Grey Cup in history, and everyone knew that it was going to be a classic. Between the Eskimos and the Argonauts, it was everything swung back and forth. Damon Allen had to be replaced by Danny McManus, I think it was. Well, someone had to replace him at quarterback. Yeah, so Edmonton took care of Toronto. And I'll tell you one. Gizmo Williams returned a missed Hank Olesic field goal, 119 yards for the touchdown, which you can do in the CFL and all that, and did his little flip. So Edmonton looked pretty good. Toronto had the lead, and then Edmonton kicked a field goal to make it 38-36. I would say Jerry Kaharik was the one. But yeah, Edmonton beat Toronto 38-36. It was impressive and all that. Edmonton escaped with everything. Number 8 is the 1962 Fog Bowl, Winnipeg Hamilton. This was not actually the overtime game I was thinking. I know a lot of you would be thinking, what about the other overtime game in Grey Cup history? And that was 1961. But 1962's finish was actually shocking. Winnipeg took on Hamilton on a clear, crisp Saturday afternoon, and it was big. It was so big that ABC's Wide World of Sports was going to broadcast part of it for the American audiences. Unfortunately, though, with the game being played at Exhibition Stadium in Toronto, well, now BMO Field, if you will, Toronto did their jobs at, well, Exhibition Stadium, you know, the fog lifting over the water and all that. By the third quarter, you just couldn't really see anyone on the TV screens, even too. CBC tried their best. ABC did their best, but they couldn't. The Fog Bowl happened, and the teams actually had to go through the last 8 minutes with the game to be suspended till Sunday. And nobody scored points, even though that it was a clear, crisp field. But yeah, Winnipeg defeats Hamilton 28-27. That is actually stranger than fiction. Number 7 is the 1954 Grey Cup, Edmonton, Montreal. So the 54 Grey Cup, everyone says it's big, and it's actually the first Grey Cup it's the oldest Grey Cup to be in existence, like to be fully in existence and all that. Not like it's a highlight package. So Edmonton would take on Montreal for the first of 3 straight years. They would meet in 55 and 56. But Edmonton did their job with Jackie Parker from Mississippi State and a few other key players, including Normie Kwan, the first Chinese-Canadian icon of the CFL. I think there have been a few others, but not so much. Edmonton and Montreal would play each other. Montreal had a lead 25-20, if you will. And all they needed to do was basically sit on the ball. But basically, the victory formation was not really invented in the 50s. And Sam Etcheverry threw something to Chuck Hunsinger, who allegedly tried to throw a forward pass, but the ball was deemed a fumble, and Jackie Parker scooped it up for 96 yards. There was a massive debate whether it was a forward pass or not, because if it was a forward pass by Hunsinger, that was a incomplete pass, and Montreal would have still had possession. However, it didn't happen that way, and Jackie Parker got the touchdown, and that was big. It's still in major folklore 7 decades later. So anyway, Montreal would lose to Edmonton in the next 2 Grey Cups as well, so that's just hard. Number 6 is the 1981 Grey Cup, Edmonton, Ottawa. So anyway, Edmonton and Ottawa were playing each other. And, Edmonton was the dynasty. They won the Grey Cup in 78, 79, and 80. They were looking for a four-peat, something that rarely was done in the CFL. Ottawa was looking forward to coming back from a 5-11-1 season and winning the Grey Cup because the East was very weak. Hamilton was at 500, but they failed to Ottawa in the Eastern Final. So Ottawa would go face Edmonton at Stade Olympique in Montreal. And somehow, in some way, J.C. Watts and the Rough Riders were up 20-1 on Edmonton. So it looked like one of the biggest Grey Cup / football upsets ever. But then Edmonton, with Warren Moon at the helm instead of Tom Wilkinson, helped them win 26-23 on a last-second field goal by Dave Cutler. So they escaped and all that. They did win the 1982 Grey Cup to make it 5 in a row, but after that they failed. Number 5 is the 2017 Grey Cup, Toronto-Calgary. So Calgary lost to Ottawa in the 2016 Grey Cup, which went to overtime. But Calgary decided to do better. The ironic part was that, Ottawa was playing the Grey Cup in Toronto in 2016. Toronto would play the Grey Cup in Ottawa in 2017. Calgary had a good chance and all that with the snow on the field. All Calgary's receiver had to do was get the ball, fall to the turf, and, use up some clock. But he decided to try to gain extra yards. He fumbled the ball, and Deshaun Kaiser, or whatever his name is. No, sorry, DeVar Posey put up a 100-plus yard fumble recovery, a scoop and score. The action wasn't done. Toronto still had to kick a last-minute field goal to beat Calgary, and it was just amazing how the Argonauts could beat Calgary in the Grey Cup of 2017. And again, Calgary fumbled their chance to win the Grey Cup, but they would win in 2018, so revenge is still very, very sweet. Number 4 is the 1976 Grey Cup, Ottawa, Saskatchewan. So the Battle of the Rough Riders, you know that South Park clip. The Rough Riders are really giving into the Rough Riders, and the Rough Riders have to know how to beat up the Rough Riders. You know what I mean? Both teams known as Rough Riders. Ottawa's Rough Riders were 2 words, rough and riders. Saskatchewan was just 1 word. Confusing, right? Yeah. So Exhibition Stadium, this was the last Grey Cup before they had to have the baseball field on because the Blue Jays were playing at Exhibition Stadium and would do that for 12 years. Ottawa and Saskatchewan would have great rivalries. 1966, they had a great Grey Cup against each other, and I would say 1969 as well. So anyway, Ottawa had the thing over Saskatchewan. They actually had a simple pass from Tom Clements to Bill Hananakwa be the longest touchdown reception in history till Pat Woodcock in 2002 would break it. Saskatchewan looked pretty impressive, and then Ottawa was down the field with 20 seconds left, and then Tom Clements threw the ball. Tony Gabriel was wide open. The CTV broadcasters said, Gabriel's open in the end zone. And touchdown. Clements to Tony Gabriel. Ted Provo missed his assignment. And that was it. Ottawa beat Saskatchewan 23-20 to win the Grey Cup, giving Ottawa their last Grey Cup as a city till 2016. Ironically enough, that was in Toronto when they won it. So yeah, Tom Clements did his job. Number 3 is the 1994 Grey Cup, BC Baltimore. I know you'd be thinking, Baltimore, was there some kind of US Canada battle? Was it some kind of challenge cup? No. The CFL decided in '93 to recoup some financial problems to actually have the Grey Cup, to actually have teams in the United States. And the first team was the Sacramento Gold Miners. And then in '94, they decided to add teams like Las Vegas, Shreveport, Baltimore, and Birmingham. Baltimore would be the only good team, American-based team in the CFL. Well, Baltimore had Tracy Ham at quarterback, Mike Pringle at running back, and had some stars on defense like Carl Anthony. I think it's brother Charles Anthony. But anyway, BC would take on Baltimore in the Grey Cup. BC had to fight off Calgary in the Western Final to get to the Grey Cup on home soil. BC and Baltimore battled each other. Baltimore got a touchdown on what they called a interception by, I think, Walton, and then he lateraled it to Carl Anthony for the touchdown. BC still had a chance. 38 yards, Louis Pasaglia, the BC kicker who stayed in BC throughout his career. No other teams. Snapped a 38-yard field goal, beat Baltimore between the post 26-23. Even Gus Johnson was there. Well, Gus Johnson was doing the game for ESPN too. And he said, the BC Lions are Grey Cup champions. It was dramatic and nationally charged finishes in league history. Sadly, though, Baltimore would win the Grey Cup the next year against Calgary. Baltimore would actually leave for Montreal, mostly because Baltimore had their NFL team. So BC did their job against Baltimore. Baltimore would head to Montreal, which actually was suffering out of without CFL football for 9 years. Love you. Number 2 is Saskatchewan Hamilton 1989. This was an epic matchup. It may be the greatest Grey Cup in history and all that. For the offensive shootout, Hamilton was playing in Toronto in the Grey Cup. Saskatchewan was doing their best. Saskatchewan had to go through a couple of road games, including being the 16-2 Edmonton Eskimos, to get this far. It was battle between Ken Austin and who was Hamilton's quarterback? I would say Warfield, but that can't be right. I can't remember who Hamilton's quarterback was. But nevertheless, Hamilton. Oh, Mike Harrigan. That's right. So Mike Harrigan threw a pass in the end zone. Tony Champion had to twist himself like a pretzel to make the catch, and then that tied the game at 40. Saskatchewan had time. Dave Ridgway kicked a 35-yard field goal in the final seconds. Saskatchewan won their second Grey Cup in history. So that was pretty impressive. And of course, the naysayers got mad because Saskatchewan had to lose money hand and foot because they were playing on the road. Fuckers. I said fuckers. Number 1 is the 13th Man, Montreal, Saskatchewan, 2009. Every good CFL knew this was going to be number 1. Simply put, this was infamous. Montreal was down by 16 points. They scored a touchdown, 2-point convert. No, a touchdown missed the 2-point convert, so they were down 27-25. Saskatchewan couldn't finish the job. Montreal went down the field, and Damon Duval had a chance to kick the field goal. But watching it, you knew something was fishy because Damon had pushed it wide right. But you see a penalty flag being thrown in the backfield. That meant that, it was some kind of penalty. And worst of all, Saskatchewan got penalized because they had too many men on the field. In the CFL, you can have 12 guys on the field. You have to have 12 guys on the field at the same time, offense and defense and all that. In the NFL, it's 11, but the CFL, it's 12. Unfortunately, a 13th man popped up as Saskatchewan had too many men on the line and one guy in the end zone. So because of the 13th man, Saskatchewan got penalized, too many men on the field, 10 yards penalty, and David Duval would kick an untimed down. He made the kick. Montreal won 20-27, and Saskatchewan rude the day that the 13th man, which they named for the fans, actually cost them dearly. It wasn't the fans that cost them, it was the 13th Saskatchewan player. It just didn't make sense. But yeah, this was a great, great cup. Of course, the Alouettes getting it. I'm happy. Anyway, I'm Jeff Diamond. I do.